Grief has a way of stripping away formality, revealing the raw humanity even within the most reserved royals. That reality became strikingly clear when Lady Helen Taylor stepped forward with her tribute to her late mother, Catherine, Duchess of Kent. Her words were not rehearsed platitudes or the polished language of protocol. They were soaked in love, sorrow, and sincerity, the kind of honesty that pierces far beyond palace walls. It wasn't just a daughter saying goodbye. It was a woman laying bare the unbreakable bond she shared with her mother. And the response has been profound. People across Britain and, indeed, the world have paused to reflect on why this farewell feels so different, so deeply touching. Why did this tribute resonate far beyond the royal circle? On September 4th, 2025, Britain lost one of its most quietly respected royals. Catherine, Duchess of Kent, passed away peacefully at the age of 92 within the familiar walls of Kensington Palace, where she had spent much of her later life. The announcement came in a solemn statement from Buckingham Palace, measured, formal, and brief. Yet behind those carefully chosen words lay the ending of a remarkable story. For months, it had been known that the Duchess's health was declining. Her public appearances had long since become rare, and still, when the confirmation arrived, it carried a sharp weight. A chapter of royal life had closed, and for many, the loss felt more personal than expected. For the public, Catherine was often remembered as the Duchess who deliberately stepped back from royal spotlight decades earlier. She was not the type to chase cameras, headlines, or attention. Instead, she chose a path of quiet devotion, devoting her time to teaching music, supporting young talents, and lending her presence to causes close to her heart. Yet for her family, this was not just the departure of a royal figure. This was the loss of the heart of their home. For Lady Helen Taylor, the Duchess's only daughter, the grief struck on a level that words can scarcely hold. Catherine was not only her mother, but her steady guide, the person who taught her that royalty need not mean living above others, but could mean walking alongside them. To lose her was to lose the person who shaped her understanding of life itself. Helen's tribute carried the weight of that reality. Imagine growing up surrounded by palaces and protocol, yet having a mother who valued humility above grandeur, kindness above titles. That was Catherine, and that was the woman Helen said goodbye to. Her passing prompted an outpouring of tributes that illuminated something rare about her. Unlike so many royals who remain forever on the stage of public life, Catherine had chosen a quieter path. She was not a duchess constantly making headlines, yet the moment her death was announced, tributes came from across the nation, from political leaders, from charities, and from ordinary citizens who had once met her in person. They remembered her not for royal ceremony, but for her warmth, her humility, her ability to make others feel seen. She had bridged the gap between grandeur and humanity, and in doing so, left an indelible mark at Kensington Palace. That September day, the atmosphere was deeply reflective. Family members gathered not in grand display, but in the dignified, quiet Catherine had always valued. Those close to her spoke of her final months marked not by fear, but by calmness and grace. She knew she was loved. She was never left alone. In her last days, she received back from her family the very gift she had always given them: presence, loyalty, and love. There was something deeply fitting about that for Lady Helen, however. The moment must have been overwhelming. To grieve privately while the world watched publicly is a unique burden. Few can understand what it means to hold such raw heartbreak in the public eye. And yet, Helen's words carried not only her personal sorrow, but also a broader truth, that her mother's influence had been profound not only in her life, but in the lives of all who had known her. Catherine's passing now raises a question that lingers quietly. How will her family, and Lady Helen especially, carry forward the legacy of a woman who chose such a different, quieter royal path? For Catherine's life cannot be remembered without recalling the choices that set her apart from her peers' choices that continue to define how she is remembered even now. Her story, after all, was never about grandeur. It was about dignity. It was about stepping back when others stepped forward. It was about valuing music, education, and faith in a world where titles often overshadow such things. And perhaps that is why her farewell resonates so strongly, because Catherine, Duchess of Kent, showed the world that a royal legacy can be measured not in ceremonies and crowns, but in humility, service, and love. Within Kensington Palace, a sense of calm and ease had always followed Catherine. Duchess of Kent. She was the one who softened the edges of royal life, making a household bound by duty feel more like a home. She encouraged closeness, insisted on shared meals, and valued the presence of family around the table. These moments, simple, almost ordinary, became extraordinary because of who she was. Many remarked on her ability to hold both worlds together, the grandeur of royal formality and the intimacy of family life. One day she might stand in full regalia at a state occasion, representing the monarchy with grace. The very next, she might be in the garden with her grandchildren, leaning down to listen to their stories, making them feel safe and loved. That balanced grace in public, warmth in private, was her hallmark. It held the family steady through decades of scrutiny and public pressure. For Lady Helen Taylor, this side of her mother was not symbolic, but deeply personal. She did not see Catherine as just a duchess or as a public figure admired from afar. She saw her as the guiding presence who shaped her understanding of life itself. Catherine's strength showed not only in public, but in the quiet ways she faced illness and personal challenges. Never with self-pity, always with dignity. Her calm resilience became the model Helen often looked to, especially in her own adult life. And underpinning everything was faith. Catherine's convictions gave her not only strength, but clarity, reminding Helen that even in the unique setting of royalty, personal belief and moral courage mattered more than appearances or convention. This is why Catherine's passing was mourned not only as the loss of a royal matriarch, but as the departure of a guiding figure whose influence stretched across generations. For Helen, the absence was not abstract. It was the loss of stability itself, the mother who defined her world, whose lessons still echo in the way she carries herself today. It was fitting, then, that the farewell began at the place where Catherine's final years had been spent. From the chapel at Kensington Palace, her coffin began its journey toward Westminster Cathedral. The symbolism of that transition was powerful, from the privacy of her personal world to the grand public space where the nation itself would say goodbye. The hearse that carried her was designed with a glass roof, allowing mourners gathered along the route to see the coffin clearly as it passed. This was not a farewell hidden behind closed palace gates. It was open, visible, and shared. For many who lined the streets that day, it was their only chance to pay their respects to a woman who had quietly touched their lives. The atmosphere was striking. The streets carried both silence and reverence. Crowds did not gather for spectacle, but for remembrance. Some came remembering her work in education and music. Others recalled her warmth on local visits, where she treated strangers like old friends. That glass-topped hearse became more than transported, became a moving vessel of memory, allowing thousands to take part in a collective goodbye. At the head of the procession marched the Royal Dragoon Guards, their scarlet tunics and dark plumes a stark image against a muted day. Their presence was no ceremonial accident. Catherine had supported the regiment faithfully throughout her life, maintaining close ties that endured over decades. Their measured steps, their synchronized rhythm spoke of duty and loyalty. To see them lead her one final time was to witness a visible bond between the Duchess and the causes she had cherished. When the cortege reached Westminster Cathedral, solemn pageantry gave way to ritual. Members of the regiment who had marched before now shouldered the heavier burden. They bore her coffin inside, their movements precise, careful, and deeply respectful. The sight of the coffin carried beneath the cathedral's towering arches was steeped in symbolism. It marked the intersection of public tribute and private grief, the place where history and humanity met. For Lady Helen, watching her mother's coffin arrive in this way must have carried an almost unbearable mix of pride and sorrow. Pride that her mother's life was being honored with dignity and reverence. Sorrow in knowing that this public ceremony marked the final chapter of her most intimate bond. In that moment, one image struck observers more than any words spoken: Lady Helen Taylor, walking arm in arm with her father, the Duke of Kent. The Duke, frail and grieving, leaned gently on his daughter for support. Helen matched his steps, steady and composed, carrying both his weight and the weight of her own grief. That single gesture said more than speeches could. She was not performing a role, she was simply being a daughter offering her strength where it was most needed. The symbolism of that moment lingered. Lady Helen did not seek attention. She did not address the congregation or the press. Her presence itself became her tribute. Every step beside her father reflected the respect, love, and loyalty she carried for her late mother. She had inherited Catherine's gift for quiet strength, the ability to let actions speak louder than words, and in her calm steadiness, the world saw a mirror of the Duchess herself. Observers noticed the heartbreak etched across her face, even as she carried herself with composure. To lose Catherine was to lose not only a mother, but a moral compass. And yet, in the silence of her gestures, she conveyed everything: dignity in grief, compassion in silence, love in action. That image of father and daughter side by side will remain etched in memory, a powerful reminder that behind the rituals of monarchy lies real human pain, and still, the farewell was not complete. For what unfolded inside Westminster Cathedral would reveal even more about the Duchess's extraordinary life, her enduring faith, and the personal conviction that shaped her final journey. Generations of royals gathered together that day, each presence a reminder of just how deeply the Duchess of Kent had been woven into the fabric of their shared history. At the very heart of it stood Lady Helen Taylor, carrying herself with the same quiet dignity her mother had always shown. She was surrounded by siblings, cousins, and kin who had come to pay their last respects not only to a duchess, but to a woman who had, in her own quiet way, shaped their lives. King Charles's presence carried particular significance. He was there not only as sovereign, but as family. His appearance was a visible gesture of the affection he carried for his cousin by marriage, a bond often spoken of but rarely seen so clearly on display. Charles has often emphasized the value of family ties and the strength they bring to the monarchy, and on this day, those words took visible form. The Prince and Princess of Wales were also among those who attended. For many watching, their presence spoke volumes. They are, after all, the faces of the monarchy's future, bearing much of the responsibility for carrying the institution forward into a new era. Their attendance was more than protocol. It was a quiet recognition that the Duchess's years of service would not be forgotten. Even as the family continues to step into a changing royal landscape under Charles's reign, surrounding them were members of the extended royal family, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, the Duke of Kent's siblings, and the younger royals who had known Catherine less as a public figure and more as an aunt, a godmother, or even a grandmotherly presence. Each person there represented a different chapter of her life, from the early years when she first married into the House of Windsor to the later decades when she became a steady matriarchal figure. And yet, there was one absence that many noticed. Queen Camilla, who had been expected to join her husband, was unable to attend due to acute sinusitis. Her absence was understood illness, strikes without warning, but the very fact that she had intended to be there showed how much Catherine had meant, even to those who had only shared a part of her later life. The Prince and Princess of Wales went a step further, sending a handwritten message of condolence, signed simply WNC, stripped of the formality that usually defines royal communication. This small gesture stood out. It was warm, personal, and deeply human. It reminded the nation that in moments of grief, titles and protocol fade away, leaving behind something far more universal: shared loss, shared remembrance, and the bonds of family. Tributes extended beyond the palace walls. Prime Minister Keir Starmer spoke of the Duchess with words that many found strikingly apt. He praised her compassion, her dignity, and the humanity she brought to every aspect of her public role. These were not just official phrases, but reflections of how she was truly seen by those who met her through charity work, through education programs, or even in fleeting encounters. She had a way of making people feel seen, no matter the circumstance. For Lady Helen Taylor, hearing these words must have been bittersweet. To her, they described not only the Duchess of Kent, but the mother who had quietly shaped her outlook on life. Those qualities, compassion, humility, and faith, were not just public virtues, but the values she had passed down to her children. The grandchildren's voices added an even more intimate layer. Lady Marina and Lady Amelia Windsor spoke not of a duchess, but of a grandmother who made time for them, who listened, who shared in the simple moments of family life. They remembered conversations at the dinner table, advice given with patience, and the gentle presence that always made them feel loved. In their eyes, she was never distant or unapproachable, but warm and reassuring. Even outside the immediate family, her legacy was felt. India Hicks, one of her many godchildren, recalled how the Duchess never forgot a birthday, never failed to send a card or thoughtful note. At Christmas, she always chose small but meaningful gift gestures that proved her attention to detail and the care she carried for those in her circle. These were not grand or ceremonial acts, but they were deeply human ones. They showed that she understood the power of small kindnesses, of never letting people feel forgotten. Her work in charity, particularly in music and education, reflected that same philosophy. To Catherine, music was not just performance. It was a tool for confidence, discipline, and joy. She believed it could transform lives, especially for young people who lacked opportunity. Many of the programs she championed will continue long after her passing, standing as a living legacy to her faith in the next generation. Lady Helen's own tribute, perhaps, captured her best. She did not describe her mother as a duchess bound by duty, but as a mother who balanced royal responsibility with a deep devotion to family. Her words cut through the ceremony and spoke directly to the truth. Catherine had been more than her title. She had been a guide, a source of comfort, and a parent whose love never wavered. Her final chapter came quietly. With her burial at Frogmore Royal Burial Ground on the Windsor Estate, place of peace, chosen not for grandeur, but for the same simplicity she had valued in life. There, among generations of royals, she was laid to rest. Flags across royal residences were lowered to half-mast, a solemn acknowledgement of her long service and quiet dignity. And as the family stood together the story of Catherine, Duchess of Kent, came full circle. She had lived a life in balance between tradition and humility, between public duty and private love. She will be remembered not only as a duchess, but as a woman of faith, compassion, and grace. Through the lowered flags, the tributes from leaders, the tears of her grandchildren, and the words of her daughter, one truth remained clear. Catherine's influence will endure. She may have lived much of her life outside the spotlight, but her light continues to shine in the lives of those she touched.